The boardroom door clicked shut behind me, and the air felt thicker than it ever had in that building. 23 floors up, the city sprawling out through the glass like a map I now owned. Richard Harlan sat at the head of the table, tie loosened, face pale, eyes fixed on the acquisition papers in front of him. Beside him, Vanessa Klein, legs crossed, fingers drumming on the polished wood, trying to look bored but failing. I could see the tremor in her hand from across the room. I didn't sit. I just stood there, letting the silence stretch until it hurt. Then I spoke, quiet, almost gentle. "You're both fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out in 5 minutes." Richard's mouth opened, closed. Vanessa let out a sharp laugh that died halfway. The lawyers on my side of the table didn't move. They didn't need to. Everything was signed. Everything was done. I leaned forward, palms on the cool surface, and looked straight at the man who once told me I was family. 5 years ago, you did this to me. Same room, same table, same words, almost. Do you remember? Richard finally found his voice. "Alexander, this is insane. We can talk." "No." I cut him off, soft but final. "We're done talking. You talked enough back then. My name is Alexander Voss. I'm 41 years old now. I used to be the guy who stayed until the lights went out in this very building, who knew every client's birthday, who built Harlan and Associates from a 20-person firm into the powerhouse it became. I was the one Richard called his right hand, his protege, the son he never had. I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. And today, I took it all away from him. I watched the color drain completely from his face as the reality settled. Vanessa stood up too fast, chairs scraping loud against the floor. She looked at me like I was a stranger. Good, because the man she knew 5 years ago, he died the day they handed him a box and told him to clear his desk. I can still feel the weight of that moment now, telling you this. My chest tight, throat raw, like I'm right back there. The satisfaction I thought I'd feel. It's there, cold and sharp, but underneath it, something heavier. Something that tastes like ash. How did it come to this? How does a man spend half a decade building something in the dark just to burn someone else's world down? Let me take you back. It started on a Tuesday morning in late spring, the kind of day where the light through the office windows felt hopeful. I'd been at Harlan and Associates for 13 years. Started as a junior account manager, straight out of grad school. Worked my way up to executive vice president by 36. Richard had mentored me personally, brought me into his inner circle, invited me to his lake house on weekends, introduced me to his wife and kids like I belonged. I didn't have much family of my own, just an aging mother in Ohio I sent money to every month, so his attention filled something empty. I was loyal the way only the lonely can be. That morning, I walked into the office a little after 8. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other, already answering emails. The place was buzzing, normal energy. I nodded at people, stopped to joke with Marissa at reception, dropped my coat in my corner office with the view of the river. I was happy, actually happy. By noon, everything was gone. Richard called me into this same boardroom. Just him and HR's Karen, sitting there with a folder. No greeting, no small talk. He looked tired, older than I'd ever seen him. "Alexander," he said, "we're making some changes. Restructuring. We have to let you go." I laughed at first, thought it was a joke in poor taste. When he didn't smile, I asked why. He talked about budget, redundancy, shifting priorities. Words that didn't land because they didn't make sense. I'd just closed the Meridian deal, our biggest account ever. My numbers were the best in the company. Everyone knew it. Then Vanessa walked in. She'd been a mid-level marketing coordinator for about 8 months. Pretty, ambitious, always lingering after meetings when Richard was around. I'd noticed the way she laughed at his jokes a little too loud, the way he found excuses to stop by her desk. Office gossip had started whispering, but I shut it down in my head. Richard was married, happily, he always said. 25 years with Claire, 3 kids. He wouldn't. But there she was, standing beside his chair like she belonged there, while Karen slid the severance agreement across the table. I looked at Richard, really looked, and I saw it. The guilt flickering behind his eyes, quickly hidden. "You replacing me with her?" I said. Not a question. He didn't answer, just pushed the papers closer. 2-week severance, a non-disclosure agreement, a non-disparagement clause. They wanted me quiet, gone, erased. I stood up slowly. My legs felt far away. I remember the hum of the air conditioning, the way the sunlight hit the table and made the wood glow. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I'd never sit here again. I didn't beg. I didn't yell. I just asked, "How long?" Richard looked down. Vanessa spoke for the first time. "Alexander, it's business. Nothing personal." I looked at her, really looked, and I smiled, small and empty. "Yeah," I said, "nothing personal." I packed my office in 20 minutes. A few framed photos, some awards, the plant I'd kept alive for 6 years. People avoided my eyes in the hallway. Some murmured sorry, most pretended to be busy. Security walked me to the elevator. I didn't cry until I reached the street. The weeks that followed were grey. I sent out resumes, made calls, leaned on every contact I had, but Richard's reach was long. Word travels fast in this industry. Suddenly interviews dried up. Offers vanished. I heard through a friend that Richard had been making quiet calls, painting me as difficult, disloyal, burned out. Anything to protect his story. My savings started shrinking. My mother's nursing home bills kept coming. I sold my car, then my watch, then moved into a smaller apartment across the river where the trains rattled the windows all night. I stopped sleeping. I'd sit in the dark with a glass I barely drank from and replay every moment. Every dinner at Richard's house where Claire passed me the potatoes and called me one of theirs. Every late night Richard and I worked side by side on pitches, him clapping me on the back, saying, "We're building something here, kid. You and me, and Vanessa." I looked her up one night, half drunk, scrolling through her socials. Photos of her at company events suddenly made sense, always close to him, smiling up at him, his hand on her back. The anger came slow at first, then all at once. It lived in my chest like a second heart. I told myself I'd move on, find something else, start over. But every rejected application, every pitying look from old colleagues, every night I lay awake listening to the trains, something hardened. One morning, around 4, when the sky outside was starting to lighten, I made a decision. I wasn't going to disappear. I was going to build something they couldn't ignore. I took the last of my savings and registered a new company, Voss Strategies. Just me at first, working from a rented desk in a co-working space that smelled like burnt coffee. I cold-called former clients, the ones I'd personally brought in, the ones who trusted me more than the firm. Some took my calls. A few said yes. I worked 18-hour days. I learned new software, studied markets I'd never touched, hired freelancers when I could afford them. I kept my head down. No social media, no industry events where Richard might see me. I became a ghost. And slowly, painfully, the company grew. First 5 employees, then 20, then 50. We took on projects Harlan and Associates would have killed for. We won awards they used to win. Clients started leaving them for us, quietly, one by one. I never celebrated. I just kept working. 5 years passed like that. 5 years of quiet, relentless building. Until the day came when Harlan and Associates hit trouble. Overextended, bad investments. Richard's attention divided. Rumors of the affair finally reaching Claire. Divorce papers. Board pressure. Their stock dipped. That's when I started buying. Quietly. Through shell companies. Through investors who believed in me. Piece by piece. Until I had enough. Until the day I walked back into that boardroom. Not as an employee, but as the majority shareholder. And now here we are. I'm telling you this because I need someone to hear it. All of it. The parts I'm proud of, and the parts that keep me awake now. Because revenge, when it finally comes, doesn't feel like fire. It feels like ice. And I'm not sure I'll ever thaw. I didn't tell a soul. Not one. For the first year after they fired me, I barely spoke to anyone outside of client calls. Friends from the old days reached out at first texts, invites for drinks, the usual pity parade. I let them fade. Responded late, short, until they stopped trying. It was easier that way. No explanations. No risk of slipping. I moved into a 1-bedroom in a part of the city where no one from Harlan and Associates would ever go. Brick walls, exposed pipes, a kitchen so small I could barely turn around. The rent was half what I'd been paying, and that was good, because money was bleeding out fast. I sold almost everything furniture, suits I'd had tailored, the leather weekend bag Claire gave me one Christmas. Kept only what fit in 2 suitcases and a few boxes. Every night I'd come home, kick off my shoes, and open the notebook. Plain black cover, nothing written on it. Inside were lists. Client names I'd brought in, competitors, weaknesses, markets Richard had ignored because he thought they were too small, too risky. Ideas I'd pitched in meetings that he'd smiled at and then shelved. I turned those shelved ideas into my foundation. The first client I stole was Meridian. I'd closed them originally, built the relationship from scratch. When I called Tom Whitaker, their CFO, 6 months after I was gone, he picked up on the second ring. Alex, Jesus, man. We heard what happened. You okay? I told him I was starting something new. Small, focused, hungry. Asked if he'd give me a shot at their upcoming rebrand. He hesitated. Loyalty to Richard was still there, tangled up in years of golf outings and holiday baskets. But he was also unhappy. Vanessa had taken over my old accounts, and things were slipping. Deadlines missed. Creative off-brand. Tom's team complaining. Send me a proposal, he said finally. No promises. I worked on that proposal for 3 weeks straight. Barely slept. Drank too much coffee. Ate standing up over the sink. When I emailed it, my hands shook hitting send. 2 days later, Tom called back. You're hired, but Alex, keep it quiet for now. That was the first crack. Words spread carefully, the way secrets do in this industry. Another client followed, then another. I hired my first employer, sharp kid named Lena, who'd interned at Harlan the summer before and seen how Vanessa operated. She came to me furious, ready to prove something. We worked out of that co-working space with the terrible lighting and the guy who always microwaved fish. I kept the lights low in my corner, headphones on, building in silence. I started tracking Harlan's numbers the way other people track sports scores. Public filings, industry reports, whispers from vendors who were getting paid late. Richard was distracted. The divorce had started. Claire found out about Vanessa the year after I left messy. Public, board members, uncomfortable. Vanessa moved up fast. VP of Client Services by year 2. Photos online of her at events on Richard's arm, smiling like she'd earned it. I saved those photos in a folder I never opened unless I needed fuel. I told myself it was just business. That I was building something better, cleaner. That success would be its own answer. But late at night, when the city went quiet and the trains stopped running, I'd admit the truth to the dark. I wanted them to feel it. I wanted them to wake up one day and realize everything they took for granted was slipping away, and they couldn't stop it. So I planned. Not wild, dramatic things, nothing illegal. Just smart, patient, relentless. I cultivated relationships with Harlan's investors, quiet lunches, golf games I could finally afford again by year 3. I listened more than I spoke. Let them complain about Rich's focus, about margins shrinking, about younger firms eating their lunch. I started buying shares. Small amounts at first, through a trust in my mother's name after she passed. Then more, through holding companies, through friends who believed in me and didn't ask too many questions. Every time the stock dipped, I bought more. I kept my name off everything. Voss strategies grew, won awards, made headlines, but Alexander Voss stayed in the background. Interviews given by my partners, photos carefully cropped. Richard never saw me coming. By year 4, we were bigger than they were in half the markets they used to dominate. Clients jumped when their contracts came up. Talent too, good people leaving Harlan, coming to us with stories that made my blood boil. Vanessa screaming in meetings, Richard drinking at lunch. I watched it all from a distance, calm on the outside, burning on the inside. I told myself it wasn't revenge. It was correction, balance, the natural order reasserting itself. But that was a lie I got good at telling. Because every acquisition, every client win, every time I saw their numbers drop, I felt it. A dark satisfaction low in my gut. A whisper that said, keep going. Year 5. Harlan and Associates was vulnerable. Debt eye, stark at half its peak, board pushing Richard to sell or step down. That's when I made my move. Not loud, not yet. I approached a private equity group I'd worked with before, told them I had an opportunity. A distressed asset with strong bones, bad management, turnaround potential. They listened. I showed them the numbers. My numbers. Voss strategies, profitable, growing, lean. Harlan bloated, bleeding. I proposed a merger. Hostile if necessary. They asked why I cared so much. I smiled, smooth and practiced. Because I know the company better than anyone. I can fix it. They didn't need to know the rest. We started accumulating shares aggressively. Quiet block trades. Tender offers to institutional holders tired of waiting for recovery. Richard fought back at first. Defensive measures, poison pills, press releases about bright futures. But he was tired, distracted, alone. Claire had taken the house. The kids barely spoke to him. Vanessa was still there, but rumors said even that was fraying. Power shifts do that to affairs. By the time he realized how much of his company was no longer his, it was too late. The board called an emergency meeting. I was invited. Not as Alexander Voss, former employee, as the representative of the majority shareholder. I wore the navy suit I'd bought for my mother's funeral. Simple tie. No watch they'd taken that years ago when I sold it for rent. I walked into that building for the first time in 5 years. Security nodded at me. Reception called me Mr. Voss. The elevator ride up felt longer than the whole 5 years combined. When the doors opened on the 23rd floor, I could smell it. Same polish on the wood, same faint coffee in the air. But everything else had changed, and nothing had. I paused outside the boardroom door, took one breath, then pushed it open. They were all there. Richard at the head, greyer, thinner. Vanessa beside him, trying to look composed. The others board members I'd known for years looked uncomfortable. Some wouldn't meet my eyes. I didn't speak at first, just took the empty chair at the opposite end of the table, the one that used to be mine. Then I laid the acquisition agreement down and smiled, small and cold. Let's begin. The boardroom smelled like fear, not the sharp kind that hits you fast, no. This was slower. Stale coffee left too long in the pot, the faint metallic temps of sweat under expensive cologne, the dry recycled air that suddenly felt too thin to breathe. 11 people around the table, and no one spoke after I said those words. Let's begin. Richard's hands were flat on the mahogany, fingers splayed like he was holding himself down. Vanessa sat rigid beside him, spine straight. Chin lifted, the same posture she used in presentations when she wanted to look confident, but her knuckles were white on the armrests. One of the older board members, Harold Grayson, cleared his throat. He'd been Richard's college roommate, golfed with him every Sunday for 30 years. Alexander, he started, voice gravelly, this is unprecedented. Perhaps we can discuss terms. There are no terms, I said. Calm, almost kind. The majority shares have been tendered. The acquisition is complete. This meeting is a courtesy. I slid folders across the table. Thick cream stock, embossed with the Voss Strategies logo. Inside, new organizational chart, transition timeline, severance packages for senior leadership. Richard finally looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, older than I remembered, the lines around them deeper, like someone had carved them in while I wasn't watching. You planned this, he said. Not a question. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit, let him hear his own words echo. For 5 years, I said finally, every single day. Vanessa laughed then, short, brittle. This is personal. You're doing this because of what, Vanessa? I turned to her. Because you took my job, my reputation, my life. Or because you took his. She flinched like I'd struck her. Richard reached for her hand instinctively. She pulled away. The room shifted. Old loyalties cracking. I stood, walked slowly to the windows. The city glittered below us, late afternoon sun turning the river into a blade of light. I'd stood here so many times before, dreaming with Richard about what we'd build. Now I owned the view. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, I said, back to them. I'm here to clean house. I turned. Richard, you're relieved of your position as CEO. Vanessa, your role as VP is terminated. Both effective immediately. Security is waiting outside. Richard stood slowly, chair rolling back with a soft scrape. Alex, he said, voice cracking on my name. We can work this out. Partnership, equity, whatever you want. I looked at him for a long moment. I wanted respect, I said. 13 years of it. You gave me 2 weeks severance and a lie. He had nothing. Vanessa stood too, grabbed her bag. This is insane. You'll ruin everything You ruined it, I said quietly. Long before I walked back in, the door opened. 2 security officers in plain suits, polite, professional. Richard looked at them, then at me. Something broke in his face then. Not anger. Worse. Recognition. He knew. He knew exactly what this felt like. They walked him out first. No struggle. Just shoulders slumped, head down. Past the offices where people pretended not to watch. Down the hall where photos of him shaking hands with governors and CEOs still hung. To the elevator that would take him down for the last time. Vanessa followed. Heels clicking, sharp and fast, like she could outrun it if she moved quickly enough. She didn't look back. The doors closed on them, and the room exhaled. I stayed standing. Harold spoke again. What happens now? Now, I said, we rebuild. Properly this time. But even as I said it, something cold settled deeper in my chest. That night, I didn't go home. I sat in Richard's old office mine, no lights off, city glowing through the glass. Bottle of scotch from his bottom drawer open on the desk. 1 glass. I didn't drink. I kept seeing his face in the elevator doors closing. Kept hearing Vanessa's heels fading down the hall. I thought I'd feel triumph. A rush. Something hot and bright. Instead, it was quiet. Too quiet. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to an old photo. Me and Richard at the company retreat for years before everything fell apart. Arms around each other, laughing at something stupid. He'd captioned it on his private Instagram, like father, like son. I stared at it until the screen went dark. Then I opened the drawer again, found the framed photo he used to keep on his desk. Claire the kids at Christmas. Vanessa had replaced it at some point. Now it was pushed to the back. I set it face down, told myself it was justice, told myself they deserved it. But the words felt thin. Around 2 a.m, when the city was nothing but lights and distant sirens, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It's Claire. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering. Then I typed back, tomorrow, coffee, wherever you want. I hit send before I could think too hard. Put the phone down. Leaned back in the leather chair that still smelled faintly like Richard's cologne. And for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't sure what came next. The revenge was done, but the cost was just beginning to come due. I closed my eyes and waited for morning. I met Claire at a small cafe downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and steam fogging the windows. It was just after 9 a.m, grey light filtering through the clouds, the city still shaking off the night. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in the back corner, coat draped over the chair beside her like a shield. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, streaked with more silver, but her eyes were the same shot, kind, seeing too much. She stood when she saw me, hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged me. Quick, tight, like she was afraid I'd pull away. I didn't. We sat, ordered coffee neither of us really wanted. Black for me, oat milk latte for her, same as always. For a minute we just looked at each other. "You look good, Alex," she said finally. Soft, careful. "You too." It wasn't true for either of us. We both looked tired, older, like the years had pressed down harder on us than on most. She wrapped her hands around her cup. "I heard what happened," she said. "At the office." I nodded. "I'm not here to defend him," she went on. "God knows he doesn't deserve it. But I needed to see you. To understand." I leaned back. The chair creaked. "There's not much to understand, Claire. He took everything from me. I took it back." She studied my face. "That's not all you took." I didn't answer. She sighed. "I left him 2 years ago. You probably knew that. The kids, they barely speak to him now. He's alone in that big house with his bottles and his regrets. Vanessa left him 6 months after the divorce was final. Found someone with more money and less baggage, I guess. I hadn't known that last part. I'd stopped following the gossip once the acquisitions started closing. Claire's voice dropped lower. "He's not well, Alex. Drinking too much. Not eating. The doctor says his liver." "I don't want to hear it," I cut in. Gentler than I meant to. She nodded, looked down. "I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm not even asking you to feel sorry. I needed to see if you were okay. If this gave you what you needed." I stared into my coffee. Black surface reflecting the ceiling lights like oil. "I thought it would," I said. "I thought walking in there, saying those words, watching them leave with nothing, I thought it would fix something inside me. And did it?" I met her eyes. "No." She reached across the table, covered my hand with hers. Warm, familiar. "Then it wasn't worth it," she said simply. I pulled my hand away. Not angry, just heavy. Maybe not. We sat in silence after that. The cafe hummed around us, barista calling orders, doors opening and closing, snow starting to fall outside in soft, silent flakes. Eventually she stood to go. "I'm selling the lake house," she said. "The kids don't want it. Too many memories. If you ever want to, I don't know, fish there one last time, or burn it down. It's yours either way." I almost smiled. "I'll think about it." She leaned down, kissed my forehead like she used to when I stayed over after long work weekends. "Be careful, Alex," she whispered. "Revenge keeps bad company." Then she left. I sat there a long time after, until the coffee went cold and the snow piled up against the windows. Word spread fast in the weeks that followed. Richard's fall was complete. No golden parachute, my lawyers made sure of that. The non-disclosure he'd forced on me years ago, I used the same template for him. Silence in exchange for a modest settlement. Enough to live quietly, not enough to rebuild. He moved into a small apartment uptown. 1 bedroom, no view. I know because I drove past it once, late at night, didn't stop. Just slowed down long enough to see the light on in a second-floor window. Curtains thin, shadow moving behind them. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt nothing. Vanessa tried to fight. hired a lawyer, threatened to go public with the affair, the firing, all of it. Paint me as the bitter ex-employee out for blood. My team shut it down fast. Emails, photos, witnesses who'd seen her undermine accounts long before she took my job. She backed off, took a mid-level position at a smaller firm across the state. New city, new name on LinkedIn. No one from the old world following. The company thrived. Voss Strategies absorbed what was left of Harlan and Associates, kept the best people, cut the rot, new branding, new direction. Profits higher than ever. Clients called to congratulate me. Industry magazines wanted profiles. I turned them all down. I worked longer hours than before, stayed in the office until the cleaning crew arrived. Went home to the new penthouse I'd bought, river view, high floors, everything Richard used to have. Stared at the walls. I'd won, completely, and it tasted like nothing. One night, maybe 3 months after the takeover, I found myself in the old co-working space, the one with the burnt coffee smell. It was late, building mostly empty. I don't know why I went there. I sat at the same desk I'd rented in the beginning. Cheap laminate. Scratch in the corner from my laptop. I opened the black notebook, pages filled with lists, plans, names crossed off. I flipped to the last page, blank. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote one line. What now? Closed it. Left it there. Walked out into the cold. The city was quiet. Snow on the ground from earlier in the week, muffling everything. Streetlights glowing soft through the flakes starting to fall again. I walked for hours. Past the building that used to be Harlan and Associates' new signage now. Voss on the side in clean steel letters. Past the cafe where ID met Claire. Past the apartment where Richard lived. I stopped outside it again. Lights still on. This time I got out. Walked up the stairs. Knocked. He opened the door slowly, wearing an old college sweatshirt, unshaven. Eyes red. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. Alex. I didn't speak. He stepped aside. I went in. The place was bare, mismatched furniture, stack of unopened mail on the counter, bottle on the coffee table, half empty. We sat across from each other. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally he said, voice rough, "You here to finish it?" I shook my head. I don't know why I'm here. He nodded like that, made sense. We sat some more. Then he said, I'm sorry. Quiet, broken. I looked at him. I know, I said. And for the first time in 5 years, I meant it. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. That we were both ruined in different ways. That revenge had taken more from me than it ever took from him. I stood, walked to the door. Paused. You should call your kids, I said. He didn't answer. I left. The snow was coming down harder now. I walked home through it. Let it cover me. Cold, clean, empty. And somewhere in the falling quiet, I finally understood. Revenge doesn't heal the wound. It just makes you the one holding the knife. And the cut never really stops bleeding. It's been a year now since that night in the snow outside Richard's apartment. A full year since I stood in his doorway, heard him say he was sorry, and walked away without giving him anything back. Not absolution, not hatred, just silence. I still don't know if that was mercy or cowardice. The company runs smoother than it ever did under Richard. We've expanded into 2 new markets, hired talent that once would have laughed at the idea of working for Harlan and Associates. Awards line the reception, walls sleek glass and chrome, nothing like the dusty plaques Richard used to keep. My name is on the building now, on the letterhead, on every contract. People call me visionary, ruthless in the best way, a comeback story. I smile in meetings, shake hands, give keynote speeches about resilience and second chances, and every time I feel like a fraud, because the truth is, I'm hollow. Success sits on me like an expensive coat that doesn't quite fit. Warm enough, but the shoulders are wrong. The weight pulls in places it shouldn't. I sold a penthouse 6 months ago, moved into something smaller, higher up, with floor-to-ceiling windows and almost no furniture. Just a bed, a desk, a couch I barely sit on. The view is better nothing but sky and river and the distant lights of bridges at night. I tell people I wanted simplicity. The truth is I couldn't stand the echo of all that space anymore. I don't sleep much. When I do, I dream of the boardroom, of Richard's face when the doors closed, of Vanessa's heels fading, of Claire's hand on mine in the cafe, warm and steady, asking if I was okay when we both knew I wasn't. I wake up tasting metal. I tried dating once. A woman named Sophia, sharp and funny, ran her own design firm. We met at an industry event. She didn't know the history. Thought my quiet was thoughtful. We went out a few times. Dinner, walks. One night she stayed over. In the morning she asked why I didn't have any photos. No family, no friends, nothing personal on the walls. I told her I travel light. She looked at me for a long time, then left. Didn't call again. I didn't blame her. Richard reached out once, an email. Short. Subject, coffee. Body, I know I have no right. But if you're ever willing. I stared at it for days. Drafted replies. Deleted them. Never sent anything. Claire sold the lake house. I heard through Harold Grayson, who stayed on the board. Some developer bought it, tore it down for condos. I felt something when I heard. Not anger, just loss. Like another piece of who I used to be got erased. I went up there anyway. One weekend in early fall, drove the old road alone. Stood on the empty lot where the house used to be. Foundation poured already, rebar sticking up like bones. The water was the same, calm, deep blue turning gold in the late light. I sat on the dock that was still there, somehow overlooked, and threw stones into the lake like Richard and I used to do after too much wine on summer nights. I stayed until dark, didn't cry. Just sat there until the cold worked its way in, then drove home. I kept the black notebook. It's in the bottom drawer of my desk at the office. I take it out sometimes, flip through the old lists, the plans, the names crossed off in careful lines. On the last page, where I wrote, "What now?" A year ago, I added something new. One sentence, let it go. I haven't yet, but I'm trying. Some days are better. I mentor younger employees, the way Richard once mentored me. I listen when they talk about their lives, their fears. I try to be fair, kind, even. One Catalina's little brother, fresh out of college, reminded me of myself at that age. Eager, loyal, eyes wide open. I caught myself almost warning him. telling him not to trust too much, not to give everything to one place, one person. I didn't, just told him he was doing good work. He smiled like I'd handed him the world. I hope he keeps that smile longer than I did. I think about forgiveness sometimes, not the big, dramatic kind. No sweeping absolution over coffee with Richard, just the quiet kind. The kind where I stop carrying it, where I stop waking up at 3 a.m. with my chest tight and the taste of ash in my mouth. Where I can look out my window at the river and feel something other than empty victory. I'm not there yet, but I'm closer than I was. Revenge gave me back my name, my company, my power. But it took something too. Something I didn't know I had left to lose. The part of me that believed people were mostly good. That loyalty mattered. That family, blood, or chosen meant something unbreakable. I don't know if I'll ever get that back. Maybe I don't deserve to. Maybe none of us do. But I'm still here, still breathing, still trying to figure out what comes after the reckoning. After the fall, after you've won everything you thought you wanted, and realized the price was the man you used to be. I don't have answers, just this story, and the hope that telling it out loud finally might be the first step toward letting the wound close. Not healed, just closed, enough to move forward, enough to become someone new. Or maybe, if I'm lucky, someone better than who I became in the dark.